I thought after 20 years, 2 decades, most of it spent in places where sand and violence were the only constants, I'd earned a quiet life, a simple one. I bought this old place, the ironclad ranch, far out past the pavement, figuring I'd trade the stress of command for the rhythm of the seasons. I built a simple life, a life where the only immediate threat was forgetting to close the chicken coop door. And then came the day the HOA decided they were the new counterterrorism unit. It was a Tuesday, late morning. I was out in the main barn cleaning up some tack when I heard it, a loud, insistent, almost theatrical pounding on the heavy oak door. It wasn't a neighbor. It was a demand. I felt that familiar cold knot twist in my stomach, the one that used to fire off when a situation was suddenly, irrevocably wrong. I opened the door and four clowns, in ill-fitting black polo shirts just muscled past me. No excuse me, no can we come in, just a straight-up intrusion. On their chests, they had a cheap embroidered patch that read, Vigilance Enforcement. Vigilance Enforcement. That should have been my first laugh. The leader, a guy with a face that looked permanently stuck in a sneer, waved a cheap plastic clipboard in my face and barked, "By order of the Sterling Creek Homeowners Association, we are here to conduct a safety inspection and confiscate all unregistered or non-compliant weaponry." He said it like he was reading a proclamation from a king, but his eyes were darting around, greedy. I remember my hands tightened behind my back, a natural habit from my time overseas. Always keep your hands where the threat can see them. Until you don't. I kept my voice flat, almost boring. This is private property. You don't have the jurisdiction, and you certainly don't have the right to enter without permission or a warrant. The sneering guy, let's call him Smirk, leaned in close. All cheap cologne and synthetic intimidation. "We are the jurisdiction here, Riley. You signed the covenants. Now, hand them over, or we start levying fines you can't possibly afford." His buddies, who looked more like former gym teachers than security detail, dropped their duffel bags and started scanning my barn, already mentally taking inventory of my property. They moved with that awful fake swagger, the kind of posture people adopt when they are playing the role of power, but don't actually possess it. My blood started to simmer, not because they were trespassing, but because they were so bad at it. This wasn't a professional threat. This was amateur hour, driven by something mean-spirited and small. But I held still, not yet. I was still assessing. Then one of the thugs saw my grandfather's old hunting rifle mounted high on the wall, a purely sentimental piece, and shouted, "Bingo! Found the first one!" And he reached for it. That was the line. I moved a small, quick step, putting myself squarely between him and the rifle. "Back away," I said, the calmness finally dissolving into something sharp and cold, a tone I hadn't used since a certain rainy night in Kandahar. Smirk laughed, a dry, grating sound. "Or what? You gonna call the sheriff?" "We're the sheriff, pal." That was the second confirmation, the final piece of data I needed. They weren't just low-level HOA enforcers. They were impersonating law enforcement, leveraging the power of an HOA document to commit actual felony intrusion. I flicked my eyes down to their belts. No real badges, just those cheap plastic ID holders you get at a convention. What they didn't know, what no one in this sleepy county really knew, was that Major Alex Riley hadn't retired just to prune roses. I had been in covert operations for my last decade in the Army, commanding a specialized counterterrorism unit. That old habit kicked in immediately: assess, neutralize, extract. My eyes did the math. 3 viable exits, 4 intruders, and my trusted .45, nicknamed the Judge, holstered at my hip, loaded and ready. I needed time and confirmation. I needed them to commit. "Fine," I sighed, playing the part of the defeated homeowner. "Take the gun, but you better be absolutely certain this is what you want to do." Smirk smirked wider. "Oh, I'm certain, Riley." He didn't see my thumb slide casually under the workbench, pressing the hidden encrypted comm link button that sent a single coded burst out to my people. He didn't know that the 3 farm hands I supposedly hired outside were actually former teammates: a Marine Force recon scout, an Army Ranger medic, and a Delta communications specialist. We'd been running dry fire drills on this ranch for months. My signal was out. The moment Smirk's greasy fingers brushed the wood of the rifle stock, a high-pitched, almost imperceptible whistle, not from me, but from a bird call hidden in the tree line, cut through the air. That was my external confirmation. 3 shadows, not my immediate team, but the guys who handle local security, slipped silently through the side door, blending immediately into the shadows of the machinery. The vigilance enforcement crew didn't even twitch. They were too caught up in their little power trip. Smirk spun back to me, shoving a wrinkled, cheap printout against my chest. "Sign this notice. If you refuse, we seize every weapon you own and fine you $50,000 for violating safety codes." I let my eyes drift over the paper. The HOA logo was pixelated and my name was spelled Riley. I let a genuine chilling smile creep onto my face. "You really think this cheap printout is going to hold up in a federal court, Smirk?" His jaw tightened, the mask of false authority cracking. "Court? You won't make it to court, Riley. Get the weapons, boys. If he resists, bag him too." A big, blocky thug moved toward me, flexing his non-existent muscles. That was it. The act was over. In one smooth, blinding motion, the .45 was out of the leather, leveled, and aimed squarely at the center of the thug's chest. The entire barn froze solid. "Step back," I instructed. My voice wasn't loud. It was calm, steady, and utterly devoid of fear. Too steady for a man who was supposed to be terrified. Smirk's face went white, the blood draining out instantly. "Whoa, whoa! You can't pull a gun on HOA officials! That's assault!" I tilted my head. My eyes locked on his, enjoying the moment of pure, raw terror I saw there. "Funny thing about that," I whispered. HOA officials don't usually wear fake badges, drive unmarked personal vehicles, and try to commit grand larceny under the guise of safety codes. Just then, the main barn door was kicked inward with a resounding crash. It was Gus, the former Marine, standing framed by the sunlight, a vintage hunting shotgun held loosely in his hands. "Boss, perimeter secure," he announced, his eyes never leaving the 4 intruders. No witnesses, no local interference. The vigilance crew looked around like trapped rats. Smirk tried to raise his hands, his voice regaining a pathetic semblance of control. "Okay, let's calm down. We were just following orders." "Whose orders?" I barked, taking one calculated step closer. He swallowed hard, trembling. Brenda Vance, the president of the HOA. She said you were a threat to the community, that you had illegal weapons. She said you were stockpiling for some kind of insurrection." The word hung in the air, heavy and ridiculous. I cut him off, lowering the .45 just an inch, enough to show I wasn't going to shoot, but ready to move. "I am the community, son. This is my land, paid for with 20 years of service, and every single weapon here is legal, registered, and accounted for." The true fear, the realization that they had messed with something far bigger than a grumpy farmer, finally flashed in Smirk's eyes. "You boys picked the wrong ranch," I growled, holstering the judge. "And you have no idea who you're dealing with." Outside, the rumbling started, not a pickup truck rumble, but the deep, throaty growl of powerful, heavy vehicles. My true backup. Smirk's head snapped toward the sound, his voice shaking uncontrollably. Who's coming?" I didn't answer. I just whispered into the sudden silence, "Operation Blacksmith, Phase 1. That's when the real show started. The barn doors burst open completely, flooding the room with blinding sunlight. 3 black, unmarked SUVs skidded to a halt outside, kicking up thick clouds of red dust. Doors flew open, and 6 men, moving with the terrifying silence and precision of a well-oiled machine, poured out. They were wearing tactical gear, but their uniforms bore no local police insignia, just a single stylized, golden arrowhead patch on their chests. The HOA fakes stumbled backward, their petty bravado collapsing completely. "What the hell is this?" one of them screamed, his voice cracking like dry wood. My men knew the drill. 2 flanked the sides of the barn, securing the exits, while the remaining 4 formed a tight, silent line, rifles up, but pointed down, professional, disciplined, and utterly terrifying. Smirk tried one last time to sound tough. You can't just bring a private militia out here? That's illegal!" I took a slow step forward, my old combat boots echoing on the concrete floor. Private militia? I met his terrified gaze. No, son. This is a federal response team. My team. He blinked, confused, pale. Federal? You? What are you talking about? I let the weight of my past settle over him like a shroud. I wasn't just some major who retired to buy a ranch. I commanded a covert U.S. Army Special Task Unit specializing in high-level domestic counterterrorism. And you just initiated a military protocol reserved for neutralizing significant threats to national security, driven by a domestic conspiracy. Smirk was visibly shaking, his plastic badge trembling under the light. We didn't know. She just said you were dangerous. He hesitated, fear finally winning over loyalty. Brenda promised us $20,000 cash if we confiscated everything before the real authorities got wind of her plans. The sheer, staggering, petty greed of it all made my blood run hot. So you impersonated federal officers and stormed my property, a veteran's property, because some jealous, power-hungry neighbor dangled a few bucks in your face? She wanted my land, not my guns. The guns were just her leverage. The men glanced nervously at each other. Before Smirk could formulate another lie, the sound of a vehicle, loud and aggressive, tore through the tension. Everyone froze as Brenda Vance's luxury black SUV skidded into the yard. The door slammed open, and there she was. Perfectly pressed linen, diamond sunglasses, and that smug, entitled look that said she had always won. She strutted toward the barn, waving her cell phone like a weapon. Well, Alex, she sneered, using my first name with false familiarity. Looks like I showed up just in time to witness a criminal threatening my HOA-authorized security detail. I stepped forward, my fists clenched, barely keeping my composure. These aren't security, Brenda. They're criminals. Just like you. She laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. You really think anyone's going to believe you over me? I run this community. When the sheriff arrives and he's on his way, you'll be in cuffs before lunch. I didn't flinch. Brenda, you have no idea what storm you just walked into. Behind me, I heard the quiet murmur from one of my operators. Boss, Phase 2. I gave a slow, deliberate nod, my eyes never leaving hers. Phase 2. The next few seconds were a blur of coordinated motion. My men moved like lightning. 2 of them snapped professional-grade cuffs onto the fake vigilance thugs. Another efficiently collected their fake badges and cheap props. Smirk tried to protest, but the silent, cold muzzle of a rifle pressed against his back silenced him instantly. Brenda's smug smile finally faltered, her jaw dropping. "What are you doing? You can't arrest my men!" she shrieked, backing away. I calmly reached into my heavy leather vest and pulled out a thick, government-issued wallet. When I flipped it open, the golden seal of a federal special agent ID gleamed under the sunlight, resting directly above my old major rank insignia. Brenda froze, her confidence utterly unraveling. "You want to talk about law, Brenda?" I said, my voice dropping low, cutting through the tension like a razor. "I am the law here. These men aren't just farm hands, and they're not private security. They are a federally sanctioned response team. You just interfered with a classified ongoing operation and committed multiple felonies on federal interest property. That's impossible. You're just a farmer," she stammered, clutching her phone like a lifeline. "I earned this ranch with 20 years of service to my country," I countered, stepping closer until the sheer power of my presence forced her back. "You thought you could use fake cops to intimidate me, to steal my guns, and ultimately to steal my freedom? Not today." Suddenly, almost on cue, the familiar sound of a county sheriff's cruiser pulled up at the edge of the property. Brenda's face lit up with a momentary, desperate hope, until the sheriff, a decent man named Hank, stepped out, tipped his hat to me, and said clearly, "Major Riley, we came as fast as we could." Brenda's mouth hung open. "Soundless. That's right, Brenda," I confirmed. "Major, and now you're about to answer for every crime you've committed." Sheriff Hank turned to my team. "Get these impersonators secured in the cruisers. Federal charges are waiting for them." Brenda spun around, completely panicking. "No, this isn't fair. I run this neighborhood. You can't do this to me." I looked her dead in the eye. "You don't run anything anymore, Brenda." One of my former comms specialists handed me a small, rugged tablet. It showed crystal-clear live footage from the hidden cameras embedded around the ranch. The video clearly depicted Brenda meeting with Smirk's crew, handing them thick envelopes of cash and plotting the entire operation. Sheriff Hank held the tablet up for Brenda to see. "This is more than enough evidence. Brenda Vance, you are under arrest for conspiracy, wire fraud, and impersonating law enforcement," she screamed as the cuffs clicked around her delicate wrists. "No, this was supposed to be my victory." "You ruined everything." I leaned in close, my voice quiet, just loud enough for her to hear the bitter truth. "You didn't just mess with me, Brenda. You messed with a soldier who swore an oath to protect his land and his country, and you mistook competence for complacence." As she was dragged, fighting and screaming toward the cruiser, my real neighbors started gathering near the fence line, whispering, many of them recording on their phones. I raised my voice so everyone in the valley could hear my final word on the matter. "This land," I stated firmly, pointing to the dirt beneath my boots, "was paid for in blood and service. No HOA, no corrupt official, and no envious neighbor will ever take it from me or my family." The crowd erupted in cheers as Sheriff Hank drove off, taking Brenda and her fake army with him. I turned to my small, silent team, finally allowing myself to let out a long, slow breath. Phase 3, clean up and reset. Gus grinned, wiping dust off his shotgun. "Yes, sir." "Same time next week?" I chuckled, holstering the judge. "Let's pray we don't have to." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky over the ironclad ranch in hues of deep orange and purple, I stood on my porch. My home was safe, the threat neutralized, the system purged of its local poison. But here's the thing that sticks with me. I had to use a federal-level response just to deal with a spiteful HOA president and her greedy security clowns. So tell me this, what do you do when the small, petty tyrants in your neighborhood start acting like they're above the law? When does standing your ground go from being a civic right to becoming a full-blown military protocol? And how do you deal with people like Brenda when the local law just isn't enough? Drop a comment below. Let me know your thoughts. I want to read every single story you guys have about HOAs gone rogue. And if you like this story of Operation Blacksmith, hit that like button and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching.